Trace?
I have it on my laptop. I left it on my desk at work. So that's why I am not.
Good evening.
Hey, do you want the board agenda?
I don't depend on where they start.
Nice.
Well, I can maneuver it.
I'd like to call the Board of Finance Budget Workshop meeting for Thursday, March 6, 2025 to order. Welcome to tonight's budget workshop on the proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget. A little bit of a disclaimer for those that are on Zoom this evening. It appears that there's an issue that we are not able to fix regarding the camera. So as you can see, it might freak you out a little bit if you're on Zoom and trying to watch this. We've decided here that we will leave the audio going, of course, and we will all need to speak up a little bit because, well, actually there's no mouth necessarily reading of lips because we're so far away from the camera. But we're going to turn the camera off, and once we do that, oh, it stopped there for a second, but if you turn it back on, it probably won't. Okay. So, yes, we just want to make sure that video, there's nothing we can do about it for this evening. So, that being said, before we begin our formal agenda this evening, I want to take a moment and I wanted to provide an introduction to tonight's proceedings, which are a little bit different from on Tuesday night. First, we will begin and we will end with public forum. And in between the two public forums will be the one other agenda item that is on our meeting, is scheduled for our meeting tonight, which is to consider and take possible action on the proposed fiscal year 2025-2026 budget. During our Tuesday night public budget hearing, there were presentations on the town budget from First Selectman Matt Hoey, and the Board of Education budget from Superintendent Dr. Paul Freeman and Board of Education Chairwoman Dr. Katie Balstraci. We also offered the opportunity for the public and Board of Finance members to ask questions of the town and school officials and provide comments at the end with public forum. To be clear this evening, the public may make comments or ask for clarifications during public forum tonight, but as this is a Board of Finance workshop, dialogue will only occur between Board of Finance members and Town Board of Education representatives based on questions from Board of Finance members or the public as part of their comments in terms of the public forum, at least to start. If you are joining us by Zoom, first, thank you for participating, and again, apologies for the video. You have currently been placed on mute to limit unintended noise distractions. When I open up public forum, we will individually unmute those who wish to make a comment virtually up to 3 minutes, but ask that members of the public, should they want to speak, use the raise hand function to identify themselves. Those here in the room should simply raise their hand, the old school style, and identify yourself, and then come up to the microphone, which is on this side of the table this evening. And before making your comments, either virtually or in person, when you come to the front, state your name, address, and be as clear and concise as possible so the microphones in the room can pick you up. I would like to note also for record that the Board of Finance through the town website, I believe, Tracy, if you could confirm this, has not received any written correspondence through the email address that has been provided to the town as of 5 p.m. this evening. At this time, I would like to move on to item number 1, which is public forum. Anybody who wishes to address the Board of Finance, please raise your hand to be recognized. Please be sure to state your name, address, and limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and speak clearly and concisely so the microphones can pick up your voice. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? If someone could just do a favor just for our, yeah, just the doors, just because I know there's a meeting going on that side, so.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking to see if anybody on.
It's okay, it's okay, just wanted to close the doors. Just no unintended noises, that's all. Okay, if no one virtually, going once, going twice, anybody in person? Okay, we'll head over to item number 2. Consider and take possible action on the proposed fiscal year 2025-26 budget. As I've done every year, before we get started, I want to provide a brief recap of where we stand on the town and school budgets the revenue projections, bonding recommendations, and an anticipated mill rate projection that has been updated as of Tuesday, and maybe updated again, but anyway. The town Board of Selectmen has requested an operating budget of $38,278,882 and a debt service budget request of $10,166,847, which results in a percentage budget increase of 3.5%. The Board of Education has requested an operating budget of $75,033,590, or a 5.5% increase over last year. The total combined town and school budget request is $123,479,319, or a 4.71% increase over last fiscal year. On the revenue side, projected non-tax revenue will decrease $217,364, though, as I mentioned the other night, or what we heard from also the first selectman, though several local non-tax revenue sources will increase, or are projected to increase, I should say. Our anticipated educational cost sharing, or ECS grant allocation, is expected to be reduced by nearly $200,000, and other state grants are expected to decrease by the amount of $383,000. Regarding the capital bond authorization request, the Board of Education is requesting an amount of $1,923,916 for the following items: exterior window door replacement at Guilford Lakes, fitness center equipment upgrades at Guilford High School, chiller replacement at Calvin Lee, stream clearing phase 2 at Adams Middle School, pond renovation and retaining wall rebuild at Baldwin, and architectural and engineering services for future projects. On the town side, capital bond authorizations are made as a 2-year request, and as there was no request last year, this year the request will be in the amount of $2,253,318 for the following items: ambulance replacement and Marine 10 replacement motors for the fire department, library HVAC replacement at their building, replace the windows in the community center and repave the back parking lot at Bittner Park per the Park and Recreation Department, and road improvements and mobile columns for vehicle lifts per Public Works. Regarding the grand list, the total taxable grand list before adjustments by the Board of Assessment Appeals is now projected to be a decrease of approximately 0.21%. As we heard Tuesday night, both real estate and personal property showed slight increases over the 2023 grand list, but the overall grand list decrease can be attributed to the new state-mandated motor vehicle pricing process and new state-mandated real estate exemptions. This grand list decrease has actually been reduced somewhat due to the efforts by municipal leaders to mitigate impacts. I should say that the thanks are appreciated for getting that number back to somewhat, not back to flat, but we did get some of that back, so appreciate that. That will certainly help. With the revised projected 2024 grand list figure, and based on the budgets and revenue projections presented as of this afternoon, the projected mill rate would go from 26.58 to 27.95, or a 5.16% increase from last year. As we all know, the backup documents to everything just summarized may be found uploaded on the diligence software, which unfortunately we cannot access right now, but I know everybody's either printed them or they've looked at them or have found another way of getting these documents in our hands. So we do have all that. We also have had numerous responses to questions from Board of Finance members that have been answered by the dozens, I will say, both from the town and the Board of Education. And again, we appreciate all of those responses, which certainly make our task a little bit easier this evening in terms of that question and answer period. That being said, let's begin first with questions we have regarding the Board of Education budget and the capital bonding requests, and direct them to Superintendent Freeman and Chairwoman Balistraci for response. So I would like to open that up to the board. I would say that for the Board of Education, when responding, probably it'd be best to come up to the table for any questions, when appropriate. Okay.
I have a question.
Veronica.
With the new state mandate for the senior finance class, requires a certified teacher. Are there specialized certifications that are required? And or is it a straight teacher certification?
It does require teaching certification. The state has identified different areas, different certifications that would apply. A business certification would apply, a social studies certification would be acceptable. For us, the challenge is not the certification, it's simply coverage. And so we need to provide that course for every student before they complete their 4 years. And so we will post for the position. We could hire somebody with a business cert, somebody with a social studies cert. We will likely look for the business certification, as that is a very small area, and it would give us, right now we have one business certified teacher at the high school. Hiring a second would give that person somebody to collaborate with. We have a large number of social studies teachers, so that's likely the direction we'll go.
So the second part of that question then is it possible to hire a retired teacher, or as long as their certifications are still in place, or?
State of Connecticut places limitations on how much retired teachers may return to work, and so for a full-time position, we would be unable to hire somebody unless they chose to unretire, which I used to think was not a word, but I've been told it is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please. About retirements, it's quite interesting. This kind of goes beyond staffing, but to pension. Do you have an estimate about how many retirees you can expect this year based on prior years? And how many are certified and how many are non-certified? Maybe not for tonight.
It changes every year, so it's honestly a little difficult.
Yep.
We've had years where there have been 3 or 4, and then there are years where we've had 12. The one thing that has definitely happened over the year, not necessarily consistently, but has increased somewhat linearly, is that we are far less likely now to replace a position with a new teacher or a newer teacher. The teacher shortage means that, one, the teacher pool will have a much larger range of experience, but we are less likely to find someone for a position at the lower cost that we used to kind of bank on in the past. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, so the attrition rate is holding about steady, but the replacement cost has increased because we're just seeing fewer candidates in those pools.
Part of the issue is about non-certified pensions. They're able to leave with a lump sum. We know how many are eligible. It used to be about half.
We probably have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to do some research. The teaching pool is the largest pool of employees for us, and they don't draw a local pension. We'd have to go do some research on the other areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that.
Thank you. I'm sorry to didn't answer, but the question just made me think.
Yeah, we can get that for you.
I've got a question, Mr. Chairman. Sure. I wonder if you just give me a minute or two to get this question out. I need to ask it. I'd actually like to respectfully ask the Board of Education Superintendent to remove all SEL and DEI spending and instruction out of the Guilford Public School System. I think doing so would bring our community together, allow the school to focus on its traditional mission, reading, writing, and arithmetic. In my lifetime and 25 years in Guilford, I've never seen a community or country more divided. Bringing SEL, DEI out of our schools, into our schools has entangled the school and the town into a lawsuit. 26 states have now restricted it or made it illegal to teach SEL or DEI or the like in public schools. The U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights has issued a letter directing schools to remove SEL, DEI, and warned that if they do not comply, they will face potential loss of federal funding. And now, by executive order, the President of the United States has ordered our public schools to eradicate it. Again, will the Board of Education and Superintendent continue with SEL DEI at the risk of losing an estimated $1 million of federal funding?
Is there a question there?
Yeah, the question. correct?
There was.
They'll remove it if they want to risk losing the funding.
So I'll begin. I'm sure Dr. Balistraci will want to follow on, and I will as respectfully respond, no, I have absolutely no intention of attempting to remove the work that we do that is often characterized as SEL or DEI. The term SEL was coined some 30 years ago, and in fact refers to the idea of educating the whole child that John Dewey wrote about in the early 1900s. It is nothing new, it is nothing radical, and it is nothing different than what we have been doing forever. The idea that schools should be equitable and diverse and inclusive is equally not offensive in any way. The fact that both of those terms have been demonized does not impact the decisions that I will make and the recommendations that I will make to this Board of Education. The letter that was issued from OCR was a Dear Colleague letter. It is suggestions and guidance on its face, and when you read further, and in the response that we have received from law firms in the state as well as from the State Department of Education, it actually doesn't direct us to stop doing anything. It suggests that school districts should not use preferable processes for enrollment. We enroll any child with a Guilford address. We don't have admissions procedures. It suggests that we should not use preferable procedures for distributing financial aid. We don't distribute any. And it suggests that we should avoid unfair hiring practices. We don't privilege any race or ethnicity in our hiring practices. It further says that schools should not radically indoctrinate their children, and I will say, as I've been saying for the last 6 years, we do not indoctrinate our children. We strive to help students grow to be critical thinkers, collaborative learners, flexible thinkers, and good world citizens, none of which I would characterize as indoctrination. Finally, I'll just remind everybody in this room, public education continues to be a state and local endeavor. We are responsible to the directives of the Board of Education and the statutes of the state of Connecticut, a number of which still require us, for instance, to have a plan on file approved and voted for by the Board of Education that strives to diversify our teacher workforce. The state of Connecticut requires that. We have such a plan on file. They require us to make sure that we work with students and that we present restorative environments. We follow the directives of the state of Connecticut and this Board of Education, and I will continue to enact those requirements and those directives.
Thanks.
I would simply be saying the same things that Dr. Freeman said, although he no doubt did it more eloquently. The letter has not required us to take any action, and the things that they are naming as problematic are not things that we do in Guilford. SEL, we have been doing in public schools across the country for decades. It is not new. And we will, in concert, follow what the State Department of Education guides us to if and when that becomes something that we have to pay attention to. But at this moment, we are in complete compliance with everything at a federal and state level, and intend to continue to commit to making sure that every student in Guilford gets a fair and free and excellent education.
Thank you. Just before we move on, Tracy, did you send anything in the chat about the camera, just to make sure people who are joining know that the camera is not going to be on? Just, again, I don't want anyone to think that we don't want to be seen. We would love to be seen, except that you get really dizzy if the camera went on. Okay. Oh, that's true too. Okay. So periodically I'll just say, camera is not working. Okay, we're moving on. So, any other questions for the Board of Education? Veronica, yes.
The town of Guilford has a cyber security insurance policy. Does that cover the schools? I don't know whether it's a town question or a school, or do you have your own separate policy?
We both have.
Covers both.
It's covered for both.
one policy that covers both, and it's split between the two.
Cost is split between the two.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay. Yep, please.
This one might be easier. One of the residents talked to me, and they asked me if the curriculum was reviewed by parents and residents as part of the curriculum committee.
The curriculum is posted on the website for anybody to review at any time. The curricula are developed by committees. The committees are predominantly made up of teachers. Board of Education members often audit one of those committees. The curricula are then approved in public by the Board of Education, and public would have the opportunity to come out and comment in public as they do on textbooks that are also approved in public by the Board of Education.
But they're not actually invited in some way into the committee or pulled into these committees?
No.
We expect that curriculum is developed by those trained professionally to do so, and that is our teachers, our administrators, and our building level principals.
The board had a review of the special ed services, and there were findings and recommendations. I guess my question is, were any of those recommendations in that study instituted in the budget we have before us?
Yes, and most of them don't have a financial impact. So there are a number of things that we're continuing. A number of them had to do with direct services delivered to students at a level that would not have a financial impact. And so Mr. Scanziano and I have been meeting with the parent community to talk about those suggestions and those recommendations. I think the most significant change will be the relocation of one of the district-wide programs from Lakes Elementary School to Leet Elementary School. That will occur over this summer. But again, financially, the things we're doing don't have a financial impact.
Was the decision to not fill the para positions because of this?
No, it wasn't directly related to the report, although the report didn't speak against it. The report didn't come back and identify that we are understaffed in any of those areas, so it allowed latitude for that decision, but it didn't drive that decision.
And if I may, the board chose to decrease by 2, as we've noted before, positions that are not filled right now.
Right.
If next year, sufficient number of students have an IEP, that means we need to hire a para back. We will be required and will certainly do so. So that was a Board of Ed budget decision trying to find areas to try to reduce this budget responsibly, and doing so with positions that are not filled at the moment.
Without impacting, without terminating people.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Dr. Balsarisi, just for anybody listening, would you tell us what an IEP is?
Oh, sorry, individual educational plan.
Yep, thank you.
Which is, thank you, I'll be careful not to use acronyms.
It's almost impossible.
Any of our students who are identified needing special services, part of assessing their needs is often done in an IEP, an individualized educational plan.
It's a federal mandate.
Yes.
So
That's exactly.
you have to do it.
And the two interventionists in the investment portion of your budget, they contribute to the IEP process, or are they, what stage do they typically become involved in that?
They're involved in regular education, and so those, in fact, they are part of the effort to keep students from being identified as requiring special educational services. So they are there as additional supports to the regular classroom teachers. Students who seem to not be keeping up with the regular mainstream instruction will receive additional support from those interventionists, but that would happen prior and hopefully eliminate the need for those students to then be identified with special educational needs.
And those are for the ones that are being proposed in this budget are for elementary?
It is
Right.
2 full-time positions that will afford 2 half-time positions, or 4 half-time positions serving each of our elementary schools. And they're specific for the area of mathematics. We have a full-time reading specialist who provides intervention services at each of the elementary schools as well. It is likely that in future budgets, we would look to increase from 2 to 4 positions to match that ELA staffing, the reading staffing.
too soon for a question about bonding?
Why don't you go ahead, because I was gonna go to bonding.
Are you going to go there?
You first.
All right. So I wanted to ask, there's a bonding request for $228,592 for A&E for future projects. And, starting to notice that the amount is getting pretty substantial, at almost $250,000. And I'm wondering which firms received this money.
Do you know?
I tried to ask the question in emails, but I think it got missed.
We might have to get back to you on that. It might vary depending on the type of project.
It depends on the project. We can't say it's always going to be one firm because they may not be the expert to be the one to do
A
that.
roofing project
price.
may be a different firm than a
So it
pond
could be
or a
different.
water retention project. We may have to get back to you on that.
To go to that question, I was going to actually ask regarding that number. First of all, how was that number developed? Because I'm sure that is it is a question about that amount of money, which does go up every year, but like everything else, it goes up. But on the bond request, the numbers that are in front of us, how are those determined? I think I might know the answer to that, but is it other professionals that have come up with those numbers, and then how are they vetted?
Yeah, so those numbers, Mr. Gurnham works up those numbers by drawing from the A&E dollars from previous cycles, securing the appropriate professionals and getting quotes or suggested pricing on those. So before we began doing that, Mr. Gurnham was coming up with numbers himself, and they were much rounder numbers, and at times they were less accurate numbers. So by providing the A&E dollars in advance, he can bring in a firm, he can put in a request to get a number, and then it allows us to get a head start on the project, and it allows us to bring forward better numbers moving forward.
So it's fair to say, number one, you're not going out and getting these numbers from professionals for free, that you have to pay for it. And some of these services are more studies or more in the endeavor to get to these numbers takes more research and more time.
That's correct.
Which is much better, as we've learned in the past, than saying, well, our estimate is per square foot and what another project was, and then guessing, and then being under.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. That answers it. Veronica?
Currently, there's a part-time FOI clerk, and the request is to go to full-time. Can you elaborate on the need for why full-time? Is that position strictly FOI requests, or?
No, it's related to the relocation of the office, and so as we move into the new office at 595, we do have increased FOI activity, but that person will also be able to work flexibly, picking up reception duties as well as continuing the FOI work.
That position was offset by an unfilled half-time position that's been in the budget in that clerical area for a while.
So it's not all new dollars, and it's why on the grid we did not show an increase in clerical staffing.
I just have a clarification. So we talked a lot about the 181,000 for ECS the other night.
Yeah.
And it did actually, it passed, so it's, it passed, so the legislature passed it, and the governor's signing it. So I just want to confirm, that's being allocated to this fiscal year, or?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it is, so I do want to, it's excess cost grant, which has the same kind of letters as ECS, but it's a little bit different, right? So it's excess cost grant. It is to, I was going to say make whole. It does not make whole the money that should, by the statute, come to us, but it is to increase the amount that should be coming to us in the current year we're in. So were that extra additional money's not passed today, we would be $180,000 short in our budget this year, and now we will not be.
Right, so you're allocating
Based on
to
those
this
plans.
fiscal
Yes.
year, it's not going to roll.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm that that's
Yes,
like,
that's exactly
actually
right.
Yes.
happening, and-
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Could I follow up on that? Timing,
Yeah.
timing of that, though. Do we know the time, is it going to be received in this fiscal year? Just hypothetically, what happens if it
From what I,
received
from what I
after
was,
this fiscal
from
year.
what I received today,
Yeah.
I was told that it'll be distributed in April.
Okay,
So it should be in this fiscal year.
all right.
So,
I'm sorry, 2 months ago, when I provided the tuition report, we discussed the decreased funding level of the excess
Right.
cost grant. This is to make up that difference from what we had anticipated getting and the revised percentage that's under 60% that we had no idea was
So you,
getting cut that
so the
low.
budget had planned for a certain percentage of that to
Right.
be received, which was in the 60s?
so I think we
Usually about
budgeted-
68.
We
Okay.
anticipated receiving 68% of the excess costs we would be owed this
Right,
year.
okay.
In February, we were informed to only anticipate that we were only going to receive about 58% of the costs. So this $180,000
Gets to the
will
68.
get us back
To-
maybe
right.
to the 68% that we budgeted. It won't come close to bringing us to the 100% of excess costs that the formula says the state owes us, but we've never received 100% payback.
No, no.
But you can allocate it to this fiscal year, so it's not gonna roll over to next fiscal year.
Mhm. Right. And that was a very good clarification
And
from the
that
other
is
night, so.
actually happening.
I was going to
Yes,
ask the
yes,
last-
it is, it's official now.
I was going to ask the last time we were 100%.
Never.
Never?
Never.
Well, according to the state, they say that there were 2 years, like about 10 years ago, I think it was, the state claims that they funded it at 100%. Many districts disagree with that. Their formula was a little different those years,
Including
but,
this one.
yes.
Did we have to send Rent to batch this up to teach them
Yes,
math?
yes.
I don't recall ever receiving 100%.
Neither
Neither
does
do we.
Linda.
And some of us have been on the board for a while, okay.
I've been doing this for a long time. Yeah.
Okay, well, that helps. That's good clarification.
But because we've never received 100%, that's also the reason why when you prepare your budget,
Yes.
you put it in at
It's-
68% or
Yes.
that figure that we
Yes, we
use.
never anticipated that we
Never.
would receive that.
Right.
And we thought 68 was conservative this year, but the demand on the pool increased across the state this year to a degree that what we thought was a conservative number turned out to be a big miss, which is why the additional $40 million is being approved.
I guess that gets to one of my other questions is like trends in education. We talk a lot about numbers, but I'm just curious as to like what are the trends? Obviously, special ed is one in terms of an increase, but what are the other trends that you're seeing in terms of educational system?
I'll start, and this is just off the top of my head, but it goes to some degree to Jonathan's earlier question. So we are continuing to see increasing special educational need. There are some districts in the state of Connecticut that are approaching 25% special education identification rates at this moment in time. So we're continuing to see more students identified as requiring special needs. This is a long-term trend, and we're also seeing more severe needs that are being supported in local public schools. Children who 10 and 15 years ago would not go to public schools are now being supported in public schools. Outside the area of special education, just as we heard about youth and family services last week, we're also seeing increased demand for social and emotional supports. We're seeing increased behavioral concerns. We're seeing increased emotional concerns. We have more contact with local hospitals. We have more calls to 211 where we have students in crisis on school property who are requiring on-site service or transportation to local hospitals. We're seeing all of those as increasing demands, and we're seeing a parent community that is demanding more support in all of those areas, special education and regular education areas.
Is it too soon to tell about the changes? Some districts have outlawed phones in schools. Is it too soon to tell, is there data out yet to see if it's reducing anxiety or behavior issues?
The Board of Education received an update at their last meeting. We impaneled a study group this year to look at the question of both cell phone use in school and AI use at the school level. We're particularly excited because that study group is being chaired by a high school teacher and by a parent volunteer. It's not me running that group. We've got parents, we've got teachers, we've got students who are sitting on that group. We just launched a really thorough survey that went out to the teaching staff, to the parent community, and to the student community. Received a response like we never receive on surveys. We got a really good response rate, and that group is now unpacking both the local responses and the more national data and evidence around those topics. The plan is for that group to make recommendations to the Board of Education and the Board of Education Policy Committee before the close of this school year, so that over the summer the board can write a policy and that we can implement it for next school year, but one that's informed by the parents and the kids and the teachers rather than something that we did sort of as a knee-jerk response. Part of the work they're doing is following other districts in the state that have put different interventions in place. So we know there are school districts that are having students lock their phones in pouches as soon as they arrive to school every day. We're talking to those school districts to see what they're experiencing. We're looking at other districts that have taken no decision, and so we hope to have a really informed plan. Maybe 1 year later than some of the other school districts, but with a lot of conversation and input and data around it.
And I will say, because I'm in contact with other board chairs across the state, I suggest what we will know sooner than any decrease in levels of anxiety, et cetera, is attendance, paying attention in class, and perhaps even kind of academic before we're able, and I think we're going to sooner be able to kind of get a handle on what some of that looks like before we see decreases in anxiety, partially, as you can imagine, because we may, for schools that have literally, for instance, taken phones and put them in, I never call them the right thing, Yonder pouches.
That's the brand name.
You know, they're obviously getting more of the kids' attention for those 6.5 hours. But then kids get the phone back. So it'll be interesting to see. As someone who's done mental health services research, I'm really interested in that. I do think we're going to see an academic attendance paying attention report back before we see anything on mental health.
Since we're the Board of Finance and we're talking about budgets, I just figured, do you have any estimated cost that implementing this, the pouches or that?
It's significant, right? So we've got roughly 2,000 students if you assume that we would implement that from Baldwin up. And so purchasing 2,000 Yonder pouches is going to be a significant investment. There will then be some time involved in the management that it would be really difficult to calculate. But if it turns out that we feel it's good for students, then it's an investment that we would make. I don't have a dollar amount for you. We haven't gotten to that level of research yet.
I think the fact that you said substantial or significant is enough for
now, just to understand that.
And it's very preliminary, right? But the chair, one of the chairs of the committee, again, presented to the board. There are many possible approaches to this, right? Whether it's buying these pouches or whether it's kids have to hand in their phones at every class.
There's some that are lower cost.
Right? So there are going to be variations in approaches and variations in cost.
Right.
Back to bonding.
If you'd like. Just so you know, I have one other question that I'm going to ask. So,
Chairman's prerogative.
well, why don't you go and then I'll wrap up unless there's other questions.
Okay,
Again, we got to get through got to make sure we ask the town a few questions. Yeah. No, you're going to pass? Yeah. I don't think so. Go ahead, John.
There's two projects in the bonding request. One is for the Baldwin School Pond revitalization, and then to upgrade the fitness center. And they total about a little over $500,000. And I'm wondering, would you rate those as nice to have or essential? And how much do you think they'll contribute to educational outcomes?
So they're both really different. The pond project, that is a retaining pond at the bottom of the hill at Baldwin. And so while that doesn't contribute to educational outcomes, it's a facility necessity, right? We need to be able to control that water so that it stays in the retaining pond and doesn't cross that parking lot and cause damage to the facility. We've done a lot of work to the sidewalk, to the road, to the upper field, and we need to control the water that runs off. The other one is completely different. And so the Board of Education heard more comments from parents, coaches, and student athletes this year about the weight room facility than they did on any other topic.
By far. So that bonding, that piece of the bonding request is in response to significant, both written by email and spoken public comment, and by far, we heard about that more than anything. And the arguments were, included things, not just that the equipment is old, but that at the moment, the type of equipment in there is geared towards kind of male football lacrosse players who might need really heavy weights. And we heard a number of requests to make it more accessible by having a greater range of equipment to some of our female student athletes, as well as making it accessible to just a larger number of teams and students. So that is in response to direct parental input, parental and student input over the past 4 months.
So should I note that as essential or nice to have? Just curious,
I would say it's
which bucket is it in?
I'm not going to put it in either bucket. It's responsive to the community. It will have an instructional impact in both the PE and the varsity athletic programs. And we heard parents and students come out and talk about the import of both of those programs. There are a few things that I would define as absolutely essential in this budget. There are lots of things that are important in this budget.
Amy, did you?
Sorry, Amy.
Is this the first year you've heard about the weight room, or is this something that's kind of little dribs and drabs here and there, and then it's just...
Small amounts over many years. This was a push. This was a significant push. So it's not that we never heard anything like this, for sure. We've over the years had requests about the equipment being old and you know that things
I'll
were
add, the
missing.
equipment goes all the way back to the
It goes,
70s.
I mean, some of these things were donated to us years and years ago. So it's not new, but this level of attention, right? And it came, in many cases, it came in a pair of requests. We are only proposing to respond to one, right? The other was having supervision, having adults in that space on a regular basis, not just the coach or assistant coach who brings a team in, but adults, I was going to say manning, personing, staffing. And we, with the budget we have and the 5.5% couldn't in good conscience include that in this budget.
I can add that I spend $10 a month not to attend a well-known gym in my office.
I've had that experience.
And I see that it's become extraordinarily popular with high school kids. It's a big thing. They're using the equipment and it's social. So it's a trend.
Yeah, I would just add, it's like any other item.
Students made that point. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead, repeat
It
that.
just contributes to the overall
Mental health.
We heard
Okay.
students make that argument to the Board of Education.
It's true.
The only thing I was going to add is like a number of different items in all of these budgets may not be a need for everybody, but I'm sure if you ask any athlete in Guilford High School if that's a need or essential, they're going to say yes. Maybe the rest of the community doesn't use it, or maybe the kindergartners don't use it, or the seniors don't use it, but it's an area that there's been specific requests for it, and it is a need for a certain population. So I'm just answering, is it a need, is it a want to have? It's dependent on what side of that coin you're on. If you're an athlete, you probably think that's a need. Because that's part of what the school provides, and it goes to the whole mental health. It goes to a bigger, greater picture than just there's exercise equipment. you know, that,
To note, the Board of Education begins holding public hearings on the budget in October before we have put pen to paper, asking the community for their input. And as a public school system in a democratic society, I think it's important that our budgets reflect what we hear in those settings. And we can't every year come forward with everything that we hear about.
nor did you.
No, we never have. But when we hear overwhelming requests on two related items, we think it's important that we respond in a way that we can, that is fiscally responsible to one of those two significant requests.
And this body also knows, right, that over the past several years, what the Board of Ed has heard primarily in public comment around budget has been around athletics. Right? Not because our parents and kids don't recognize the importance of more kind of pure academics, but because they are recognizing the importance of this in their kids' lives, for students in their own lives, and that it creates both a physical opportunity, a team-building opportunity, but a mental health boost.
So the new gym, is this located in the new admin building?
It's
Teachers
in
and for
the, it's in
administrators?
what we still refer to it as a 595 building. It's in the bottom
Remember calling
level,
it
the old science,
building
the old science.
The
building.
old science building didn't work as a name going forward. So the space isn't new. The space has been there since the high school opened. The space has been there for 10 years. And this bonding request does not involve renovation to the space. It is simply talking about the equipment in the space and replacing 30-year-old, really heavy plate free weights with more modern and more versatile resistance machines and equipment that will serve a broader population than maybe just the football team, the boys lacrosse team, and the boys hockey team.
I think I got two more short ones.
No.
No, sir. No, of course you can't. I apologize.
So we made a substantial investment over a number of years in the instructional coaching. Do we have any measuring criteria that's been implemented to see the effectiveness of the coaching model and what we're getting what kind of return we're getting on that investment that we've made?
So it is a really difficult question to tease apart. And so, one thing that we need to note is that the state changed the testing model a few years ago in the middle of us building up that coaching cohort. But it's really difficult to tease out one direct impact from another. What we know is that the teachers and the principals report to us, and we see improved instruction with the coaches in place. And so teachers at first were resistant to coaching. It's difficult. It's not easy to have somebody observing your work and helping you to get better at the work. But when you really sit down and talk with teachers, they very much appreciate how the coaching drives their practice. We don't have a lot of good measures. We have the State Accountability Index that I pointed to at our last meeting. And again, I would sort of go back to that really broad measure. But considering the investment that we make in the coaching cohort, which is part of our per student spend, and when you look at our per student expenditures at the 55th percentile and you look at our performance at the 88th or 90th percentile, embedding that expense in the per student expenditure is part of what's having us perform at that level. And I would be really concerned that if we were to pull that out, we'd shrink that gap a little bit. Well, no, I don't think we would, right? Our spending would go down. We'd increase the size of that gap until we saw a performance drop off, which I absolutely anticipate. I am going to turn over my shoulder to look at Dr. Goss, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, works most closely with the coaches, and ask if there's any part of that answer that I glossed over too quickly.
I mean, I can get you information on what the research says about instructional coaching and its efficacy. Obviously, that doesn't speak specifically to our local context. We can say that in times when we have pulled away the instructional coaching piece of this model and said, like during COVID when we said, just do whatever you can do, sub if you need to sub, do whatever it is that supports kids the most. we saw a drop-off in our scores, but there were so many other things that went into that that's really challenging to say. As we have invested more at the elementary level, we've seen greater gains there. But I can't say that any of that's directly causal.
It's really difficult to tease apart the multiple variables that go into student performance. Is it class size? Is it the coaching model? Is it the materials that we've purchased? Is it the instructional techniques that we've been training on? It's just, we do so much all at once, it gets really difficult to tease apart.
Yeah. So a few residents have pointed me towards the niche site, which does rankings for schools. And, you know, I was a little surprised too. They're telling us that 1 out of 3 kids in the Guilford school system are not proficient at grade level in math, and 1 out of 4 are not proficient in reading at grade level. And I was curious, you know, maybe I was a little surprised. I thought maybe there's more behind the numbers. Has this actually been getting better? You know, I feel like we could do better than that. But over the past years, has this gotten a little better? Are we?
So first, I would tell you not to pay attention to niche. I would even encourage you not to pay attention to U.S. News and World Report. Those are outside measures. A lot of the information that they receive is from volunteers who share information. I would point you to the state of Connecticut measures. The state of Connecticut is going to have the best and the most reliable measures about our performance. That's the one where I pointed to, where compared to every other district's performance in the state, we perform at the 88th percentile. That takes into account all of the Smarter Balanced assessments that are given in math and English language arts from grades 3 through 8. It includes the SAT. It includes attendance rates. It includes college readiness rates. It's the most holistic measure that you could look at. Any of those other outside agencies who purport to be ranking or measuring schools are doing it on their own without our input, and they're not doing it in a consistent or measurable way. I'd also then say that even when looking at the state reports, it's a misread to look at those reports and to say that if 85% of your students are performing at or above the anticipated benchmark on the days that the assessment is given, that therefore 15% are below grade level or are failing. That is not what the assessment is designed to measure. It is a snapshot that is given on one day, and it is used as a temperature check as you go from year to year to year. To look at student performance and to determine how students are doing, I would direct you more to teacher grading of class work that is being provided. I would ask you to look at the honor roll at the high school level, and I would suggest you look at graduation and college placement rates. They're much better measures if you're looking at how our students are doing and are they mastering the work that we're expecting them to master. Graduation is the measure of mastery. Those tests are, it's like when you go into your doctor for a physical and he gives you that battery of tests on one day. If your blood pressure is high because you're anxious and nervous being in the doctor's office, it doesn't mean you're about to die. It's a misinterpretation of the tests to look at them and say 30% or 15% of our students are failing.
So that, you don't know if that score's been getting better or worse, or?
We
I couldn't find any historical data.
We
so I
know
was
that
kinda
across
curious.
the country and across Connecticut.
These are based on state tests.
No, I understand.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that I don't know what years niche is using either, right? We know that COVID had an impact on kids and on scores. And there's been a build back across schools across the country. So I also caution that looking at any kind of measures over the last few years, be very clear of what year the data you're looking at, because that has an impact as well. Do we have kids in Guilford Public Schools who are struggling to read at grade level? We do, as do kid in any
Every
public
school.
school in this country, right? And we have supports for those kids. There are regular assessments done to make sure we know who those kids are. And we have staff and teachers working to support them. Some of them have the IEPs I noted earlier, and so have additional supports.
All right, I'm down to one more. Yeah, all right. So, not that it's a competition with our neighbors from the east, but they have a budget of 65 million, I think, about 10 million less than ours. And how do you think we're doing compared to them? I know we're offering a pretty good value in education, but our neighbors are doing it for a little less.
Our neighbors have a lower enrollment. Our neighbors had a much more, a larger decline when enrollment was going down pretty much across the state. Guilford was seeing a much less, a smaller slope in that. I don't know, I explained the other night, in terms of increase in budget, we are experiencing a significant increase in medical benefits for next year due to our claims history. They are not. And then otherwise, they are a different school system. They are a good school system. We are a good school system.
They're 1,000 students smaller than we
They're
are.
significantly
So
smaller.
off the bat, they're 2/3 our size.
But their budget also does not include the same items that ours
Right.
do. So there are things that are on the town side budget in Madison that are in the Board of Ed budget in Guilford. So you're not comparing
Correct.
apples to apples
That's important.
when you're looking at the two towns.
Okay, that does shed some light on it.
Yeah, it's just very different.
They're different.
Was that the town we were
However,
talking about?
they're a very good school district. We work
knew
very
each
closely
town.
with them, and we partner with them closely in a lot of different areas. We have a great working relationship with our neighbors to the east.
It's not a competition.
It is
Go
not.
Grizzlies.
No, it's not.
But, I had one other, I think, quick question, sorry. So this kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, and it's not focusing on any of our neighbors. But with the teaching shortage, are you seeing an increase in the number of teachers leaving, not new teachers, but experienced teachers moving from one district to another?
Yes.
Because of
Yes.
the salaries and the benefits that one district offers as opposed to Guilford?
Yes, and in some very specific certification areas more so than others. But for most of my career, teachers would come to a school district and the preponderance of those teachers would stay and then retire out of that district. A lot of it had to do with the salary scale. Districts simply didn't need to hire somebody who had moved up in the salary scale because there were so many other options. And so once you had achieved tenure and once you had started moving up the salary scale in a school district, it was an employer's market and it was very difficult to move. We are now seeing teachers who are becoming much more itinerant in the middle of their careers because when a district has an opening for a special education teacher, the pool is so small that it's now an employee's market. And even if you've got 9 or 10 years of experience in another school district, places are going to be looking to bring you over. And in fact, there are some districts that are offering sign-on bonuses or additional years of experience to get those people. So the districts are now competing for talent in ways that we never competed before, and it's exactly why the replacement cost has gone up so significantly. We used to bring a budget to you that showed an anticipated retirement savings.
Right.
There's no line in this budget because it has cost us more to replace a teacher who's left because we brought in a more experienced replacement, not a less experienced replacement. And again, areas like world language, science, and special education more so than some of the other areas.
Before, I have a two-part question prior to bringing up the first selectman and grilling him. So the other night, and actually for the last few weeks, 4.7% is the budget number you have had for cost drivers, I believe. 4.7% are made up of the cost drivers.
That we identified, correct.
Right. And then the investment total that you had was about 0.5%. So the first question is, there's a 5.5% increase. Can you define at all what the remaining 0.3 is? That's number one. And then the number two is, any reductions that are over that investment, I would, if there are, I would assume that would be going into cost drivers and that other percentage number I'm not asking where, because we don't have that authority to say where. But where, well, what I would say is it a logical thought that the cost drivers, there'd be a risk in reducing the cost drivers?
Yeah.
That were identified, which we know some of them are mandated. Insurance is part of that, salaries are part of that, so.
So the other 0.3 increase falls into other multiple small increases that are just too small to pull together. But we've just seen inflationary increases in everything the way we all have. And so lots of lines that went up by really small amounts that together, the idea of that cost driver slide is to show you the really driving increases.
The major ones.
The big ones.
Investments, and then everything else is, they're smaller line items across the entire budget.
And gas and
Right. And
copy paper and you know.
And then to the second question, the answer is not necessarily. The cost drivers, again, are non-discretionary increases. And so if we need to absorb reductions that go beyond 5%, and we can't just take it out, and even in the investments, remember, they're not all completely discretionary. We have to provide a personal finance graduation requirement. So even if your reduction was exactly $357,000, the Board of Ed couldn't accomplish it by just deleting that slide.
Yeah, we can't.
We still have to provide a new pre-K section because the kids are coming to us, and we have to provide a personal finance graduation course because it's required by the state of Connecticut. So if we need to make reductions, I will end up making recommendations to the Board of Education that will likely go into existing programming. We will be looking at existing class size or opportunities that we afford that we may have to make adjustments to moving forward. Some of that will impact that salary increase, because if we eliminate positions, then that salary increase comes down. But if that's going to depend on how many positional reductions we make compared to other reductions. Does that make sense? I'm
Yes.
sorry, I felt like that rambled a little bit.
No, makes sense, thank you.
And if you can find people to fill those empty positions.
Yeah, so I keep reminding the principals that the budget and then the reality of filling the positions are two different things. We plan the budget for the needs that we expect to have, and then we try to fill those positions that exist as best we can. There's sort of two different endeavors.
Okay, at this point, I think we close the questions for the Board of Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For all the information. We will continue now with First Selectman. Howie, any questions we have regarding the town and team? Well, I was just going to say, and the town budget and the Board of Board of Selectmen and Mary Jane. Oh, you're welcome. So, questions for the town?
I guess I can throw one out there.
Throw one out there.
So there was 2 hires. Let's start on a positive note. Sorry, BOE. But there's some new positions. There's one in the police department dispatcher, and then there's a new position in public works for a mechanic. And, you know, being from maybe a different philosophy of government, I kind of like the way these positions were introduced, with the idea of perhaps making some savings on the replacement salary line and also possibly the overtime line. And then with the maintainer and the mechanic, I'm wondering, do you expect an offset for the cost of vehicle maintenance by having the extra mechanic?
Yes, we do. We can't quantify that at this point. It's rather complicated to do it, but we know that we are shipping work out to be done by some of the dealerships, which if we had the time we could, and resources, we could probably take advantage of it here.
Okay.
And I also appreciate the comment on the dispatcher position. That dispatcher position will, and I think we've already talked about this, I believe the chief has estimated at this point about $25,000 in savings related to replacement and or overtime salaries. But what it doesn't take into account is where he can redeploy those staff members to do the job that they're supposed to be doing. And over time, we would have been able to try to identify other efficiencies because of that. But, and that's our plan if we were to keep that position in this. And Jonathan, it'd be unfair if I didn't talk about the other position, which is the permit technician one, which I don't think you talked about directly, but that, as I think we've shown you, is has a direct correlation to the amount of permit activity and the revenue that has been generated there. But that's the other position that we would anticipate funding.
It's all right if I kind of move into the question there. That position I wasn't as fond of, because what I'm concerned about is that the permits, is this government creating its own problem, right? I know that the building code has changed and it's requiring more inspections, more permits. I'm probably not familiar with every change. I think now a zoning permit is required every time you get a building permit, which really surprised me. I mean, I don't think you should get a zoning permit if you get a new furnace. That's my opinion. I'm just one guy. But, that kind of, oh, well, the permits are justifying it. We got to buy a large software package to speed up the velocity of processing permits. We have more permits, so we got to hire more people. So that position I wasn't as fond of.
Well, I gave you the perfect question, right?
Yeah.
The answer there is it's not just the number of permits, it's what's required in order to issue them, which is someone has to review them. So we have a zoning enforcement officer, we have a planning, a director of planning. They are spending more time reviewing rather mundane permit applications, particularly on the planning side, which is now a requirement that they do it. So this technician, it will also be shared with the health department, who is facing the same increased number of permits that have to be reviewed. It's not, someone just doesn't come in and ask for a permit and it gets issued. They apply for a permit, and then there are a series of steps that have to happen before that permit is actually issued. And that's where the work is, and that's why these permit technicians, one which is already in place in the building department, has streamlined the ability to get permits out the door and get them reviewed and completed. And that's the anticipation with the permit tech for planning and for health.
But just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
during the process that you just mentioned, the applicant is waiting to get started on their project. And if it's a home repair to put a furnace in, that's small stuff. But if it's a large project and you've got financing that you've incurred and you've got attorneys and engineers and contractors that are waiting to start getting this stuff done, the longer it takes to get a permit issued or to have to come back and refile it because it was not done correctly the first time or didn't get timely processed, then you're talking about more substantial money. And if it impacts the ability of people to do business in the town of Guilford, it reflects poorly on the town as a place to come and present a project.
I would agree with you.
Right.
See, I think it would be easier if you just had to fill out less permits, but
We don't
Or for less
have any
permits,
control
but
about
So
that.
that's not.
simpler approach to me.
Unfortunately, we don't have that.
Well, yeah, that's pretty easy to say, but you know what, there are health and safety concerns related to the permits and the review and the inspections that are done that protect our citizens from things that could go really wrong when you're talking about home construction or business construction.
Along this, sort of the same lines, going back to the public works position, the mechanic, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the equipment that we've recently bought over the last few years. They're all higher tech, computer chips, so that it would seem to me that this position would have to be more specialized to be able to do that type of work. Our police cars, is that correct? I mean, is that like the teachers being certified? Does this mechanic have to be certified in electrical?
Yes, the answer is yes, they do. And if you were to go into our shop today, you would already see the manifestation of having changed the nature of the kind of work that they've been doing. Hate to say this, but there are more younger mechanics in there now than there were 10 years ago or 5 years ago. We've had a significant number of retirements. They're coming out of the training schools with the skills and the knowledge and the familiarity with the new tools that do diagnostic assessments. You still have to turn a wrench at the end of the day. The question is the software and the tools to do diagnostics require a different level of capacity and capability.
Other questions for the town?
So I guess I'll ask you about the economic director.
Right.
Economic development director.
Right.
Try to get that one right. I was curious, why did Madison decide to stop splitting the cost with us? Is that the right-
Madison decided to do so because they didn't see, well, there are two things. One, the first selectwoman saw that resource in a different light. She was utilizing that resource more for project management than she was for economic development, and Peggy would acknowledge that. We're continuing to use John in the traditional economic development capacity, which I'll answer right now, and Brian can probably back me up on this. So much more of the work we do in a community like ours with so little commercial and industrial property to attract new businesses is to take care of, is for retention and for promotion of the businesses that are in our community, and then to work with the various property owners when there are vacancies to try to fill those up. So that was the primary reason that Peggy saw a different need, and she had funded that economic development position exclusively with American Rescue Plan funds, and those were going to be expiring. So that was one of the reasons they backed out of it.
So are we picking up the other half of that cost plus an increase in the hours?
No, we reduced it's back to a 24. It was back to its 24-hour position when Madison left, and now we are adding 5.5 hours to that. It'll still be a part-time position, and that is to also, as Peggy had realistically identified, to do some project management work in addition. Okay. The current economic development coordinator has taken the lead, has done most of the work on the project related to the 505 mooring, and will continue to play a large role in pulling together the resources needed to work with the various regulatory agencies.
There's no benefits.
What's that? And at that number of hours, there are no benefits accrued to that position. Still part-time.
Meg?
Yeah. Do you have an idea of the percentage or dollar amount of federal funds that would be vulnerable in this fiscal year? Or a little bit more uncertain?
We do not have a direct federal pipeline. The only funds that I'm concerned about, I think, are on the education side, and they relate to school lunch programs and some of the Title, what number, some of the special education number.
Yeah.
Yeah, ours are more specialized when we have a specific grant. We don't have that at this point.
And like fire police aren't applying for any?
No, we're no safer grants or any of that stuff. I want to give you a history lesson, but the federal to state, or federal to local pipeline ended in the Reagan administration. They went through.
Still funnels some money.
The state does fund
Yeah,
that. So
but
where
that's
we're most concerned would be in transportation dollars. That would be an area, but we don't have annualized grants or contributions. Those are on a project-by-project basis, which we've been able to take advantage of over the years. Nut Plains Road was one, Falcon Road's going to be another one, and then that's where I think there is a possibility that there might be some challenges.
Okay.
But those are
But not for our operating budget.
Yeah, how much pass-through from the state would be the transportation money?
LOTSIP is a grant, an award program. LOSIP, which is state transportation dollars, I think we're, 250?
I was going to say 350, but
350,
somewhere around that.
and we've not heard that those are going away. So.
Yeah, and we have some applications that we would be pending for lot SIP, but we don't have any funding coming through right now.
And we have several projects that are already approved.
They're approved,
The
but
state
right,
ha-
but-
The state has the money in the bank, right? And that money is distributed via the Council of Governments.
Right.
So that's not vulnerable because they already have
At this
it.
point, at this point, you're right.
Okay.
Just the transportation, federal transportation dollars.
Slightly different, what, unfunded mandates from the state? Any that concern you?
Yeah.
All of them.
I'm going to give you the prime example. We talked about the legislation on the motor vehicle assessment process for the grand list. You want to talk about an unfunded mandate? That one change they made last year was going to cost us $817,000. Mitch and I were talking about some of these the other day, a couple of other unfunded mandates of late.
Can I get paid sick leave? Can I get paid sick leave act, especially with our public safety? Because if someone does take off on the sick leave act, with how it's been passed, with public safety, they need to be replaced. And replacement sometimes comes at time and a half. And that was not anticipated when we looked at budgets originally either.
And this morning, I sat through the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities legislative meeting, and this being the longer cycle, there's about 1,000 bills.
A lot of bad ones.
Most of them have some kind of mandate that we have to comply with, and there's small likelihood that we'll get any funding to support it.
Not all of them will pass.
No, exactly.
Thank goodness.
But that's why we have lobbyists. So, thanks for that question, Bob.
Thank you.
There was some discussion the other night on unemployment. Do seasonal employees get unemployment, so when the season's over, can they file?
Some do. When we hire people for seasonal parks maintainers, for instance, if they're not college students, which now today most of them are not, they are eligible for unemployment based on the state's unemployment laws. We've had a couple of people that we've had to let go who qualify for unemployment as well. So this, as I mentioned the last time, we've had higher than anticipated unemployment costs this year, which I expect will roll into next year as well.
We don't pay into the pool.
And we're self-funded on that too. We do not pay into an unemployment pool. So that there's no pool we pay. Like a typical private manufacturer will pay into an unemployment pool.
1.2.
Municipalities are self-funded, so therefore we just pay as we go. We had some years where we had very little to pay. The last couple of years have been more substantial, and that's why we budget what we have.
Do we contract, we used to contract for snow plowing. Are we all in-house now, including
Yes.
parks and
Yes.
the schools? So we're
Yep.
not contracting out for
We are
snow
not
plowing?
contracting.
Okay.
We contract out at the high school.
Others? Amy?
Just because it came up on the Board of Ed side, is the town looking at AI for a policy or any efficiencies? I'm not advocating or not, I don't
Yes.
like it myself, but is that something that's?
Yes, it is an issue that we are exploring. Mitch brought it up a couple of months ago. We're working with town council to develop an AI policy it's largely in terms of disclosure. And I think that's where most of the concern
And
is.
ethics.
And ethics. But most of it is a disclosure that when we create things that we have to attribute that it was done by AI. So we're looking for legal advice on it.
Hence the disclosure that you might have gotten recently.
One of your cost drivers was information technology. Is the cybersecurity insurance in that cost driver, or is the
No,
cost driver
no.
just subscriptions and increases in the software and licensing and
Yes, it is.
It's attributed greatly to the new permitting software at Town Hall South. We've been paying that from the committed fund balance, the money that's been set aside for that. And in the new year, all of those costs are being absorbed in the operating budget.
But the cybersecurity is part of the insurance budget.
Can I ask another one?
Sure. Yeah, well,
Is there someone else?
yeah, Veronica, then Jonathan.
I had a question on the slides for the fire department, the timing and the response times. North Guilford, 8.5 minutes, if I understood that slide. What is the recommended response time?
Gentlemen?
They're all here.
As soon as possible.
Is that what
Recommended response times for advanced life support are under 9 minutes, getting an ambulance or advanced life support paramedics on scene within under 9 minutes. Apparatus response for fire and assembling 15 firefighters within 8 minutes for a structure fire.
So we're right at the cusp.
We're right at the cusp, yeah. Big transition obviously from 2018, we're at 13.5 minutes. So we reduced that to just about 8, and we are hovering around about 8.5 for the North Guilford. Town-wide, we're about average of 7-minute response time throughout town.
A long time if you were in distress.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to ask about one of the lines in the police budget. It was a line for utilities, and it was going up. And I apologize if I got an old number. Sometimes I've done that, and I apologize. But it looked like it was going up by about 51%. So it caught my attention. And I looked at the historical actuals, and it looks like it runs at about $63,000 a year. And maybe we're on track for that this year as well.
Well, what happened with that budget last year, we cut that utility budget last year to make up for some of the cuts we had to take. So unfortunately, this year we are over budget. Next year we are expecting at least a 5% increase in costs. So budget to budget, it might look like a big increase, but as you say, the actual to the new budget is where we should be looking. So it's really just, the number is too low.
Am I off the mark? I mean, I'm trying to look at the actuals in the document that you gave us that had the last 3 years, and I'm showing them average of 63, and then at last accounting, I think we're at 30,000 actuals halfway through the year. So it still feels like it's running at 60,000 or so,
well, we're attributing,
even though it's appropriation for 83.
Yes. Well, I think the number you might be looking at was the original number. I think in the response, I don't have it in front of me, in the response to you, we noted the corrected number or the reduced number by the selectmen. So if you look at the number that the selectmen are recommending, there's not as big a difference.
Okay.
But it was lower last year. It was substantially lower.
It was substantially low in the current year.
Yeah,
In
right.
the current year, the budget, yes.
Right.
That's why looking budget to budget for that line item doesn't give you the right picture.
So I got it here, so I'm just going to read in the document that I got from you. It says prior year 3, it was 63,194. Prior year 2, 61,577. Prior year 1, 61,263. And then I think current year, it's running at 30,136. So, by interpolation, I just said about 60. I was wondering if we could save $20,000 there. I would take it if we could, and just seems like it is running at around 60.
We can certainly look at that number
60
again,
and
not a
change.
problem.
Okay.
I have a police question, if we're on police. So we're about a year in, I think, to the social work, or the partnership between Youth and Family Services and the police department. Do we have any, data as to the effectiveness of that?
We do, and I believe
Chief's online.
the chief,
Chief's
but
online.
I think I saw
Lynn's
also
online. Lynn was on.
Lynn, I think
Chief.
Lynn or Chris, would you be able to respond to that?
Yes, I can respond to that. So it's been hybrid because the position became full-time on July 1st. So we were, if we're looking at a calendar year, so half the year was still part-time and the other half has been full-time. We've had 137 cases alone during that time. I anticipate that with the position being full-time from July 1st to June 30th, that we're going to see a much increased number, 137 cases in that time. is still significant. And she deals every day with cases that the police bring to her.
Thank you.
Sure,
I can add to that as well.
great.
Chief, you know, I can say I interact with her very frequently when she's at the police department. She floats between days and evenings so that she can hit different hours and be able to be responsive to different clients that may come forward. A lot of the work that she does is, 137 cases might not sound like a lot, but those cases require substantial follow-up. There's been several cases where we've had repeated calls for service at certain residences, and she's been able to work with us and intervene and help bring other resources into the situation to ultimately create a scenario where we're no longer having to respond to residences on a daily or multiple times a week basis. So it's been a great investment for the town, and I recommend we keep it.
Yeah, no, I do too. Thank you for the data though, because that is that's a big caseload, Lynn.
It's a huge caseload, and as the chief said, there's a lot involved in each case. The acuity of each case is incredibly high, and she has a response rate of, I believe it's under 5% right now of people that don't choose to be followed up with. So that's an incredible percentage.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to go back to Jonathan's question. I just want to note that the utility line in the police department is budgeted at $69,000 for the new year. So, you know, the average
sorry, that happens to me sometimes. You already got it on your round of cutting, so you probably caught it.
Yeah.
And went down from 83 to 69.
I'm sorry I didn't pull it up.
No, that's fine. I'm glad.
So that anticipates an increase as we have in all of our utility budgets for next year.
And that's the 5% increase.
Yep.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Okay, just wanted to follow up on that.
Anyone else for the town?
I just want to follow up, similar to the question I asked of the Board of Education. Are you finding that town staff are leaving to go to greener pastures because other towns are paying them more than we're paying them?
Yeah, we have retention issues like everybody else.
And replacing them, are you facing the similar problems that the Board of Education is facing?
Some cases.
In some cases, other cases not. As I think this board knows, we have made some efforts and I think been successful. We did some out-of-contract negotiations, particularly with our largest union, the Guilford Employees Association, because it was apparent to me that we were perilously close to living wage numbers, what we were paying folks to work for us on a full-time basis. We made those adjustments over the previous two cycles.
2 years, and we're in negotiations right now, and still addressing certain positions within that union that are still quite low. So there's still some issues, and the ones that are quite low are the ones with the higher turnover, as you might expect.
Right.
And I think similarly to the Board of Education, we're bringing people in at a similar level as the people that are leaving. We're not always having that big delta. I mean, some we do, but we're not seeing that as much.
And there is a statewide issue with the labor pool in certain areas, particularly in public safety. And that is forcing communities like ours to take a look at the benefits packages that were dramatically reduced over the years. We no longer have defined pension plans, but retention has become an issue. And Mitch does exit interviews with our public safety employees. That is not an infrequent answer as to why they're leaving. On the police department side, I think we've been a little more successful in attracting folks who are in the second phase of their career. Officers who had worked elsewhere have earned a pension there, already collecting it, and now are working for us. But this is a statewide issue relative to retention, recruitment and retention, and we have negotiations that are underway, and it's going to take a lot of creativity to make sure that we satisfy our ability to continue to attract and retain a professional force on both sides.
Great, thanks.
Got a related question on that.
The fire.
No, Jonathan, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just got a related question on that. You know, I in some of my emailed questions, I was concerned about what kind of increases are above the inflation rate for 2024. And I know that that gets recalculated all the time, but it was roughly 3%. So I've come to realize that from the answers that there was at least 3 departments that got a 5.66% increase and some part-time employees that got a 10% increase. And I kind of wonder where that begins and ends, trying to keep up with other municipalities and taking staff from one to the other.
I can tell you unequivocally, we do not have a general wage increase of 5% for any bargaining unit anywhere. As I mentioned a moment ago, we had done an out-of-contract negotiation where we raised the salaries. In this budget, there is not a general wage increase of 5% for anyone. There are steps that they are entitled to based on their contract that may in fact give them 5%, but that is not a general wage and is not across the entire union pool.
Okay, I was actually looking for increases that were outside of steps, so maybe I got increases that included steps, but it was communications department, dispatchers up 5.66%, and
There were adjustments.
some building department inspectors were up 10%.
Right, and there were adjustments in the last dispatcher's contract for the exact same reason that Matt was just talking about, which has to do with where we stand in relation to other communities, and the retention situation is necessary for our dispatchers. That's where you're seeing that. You will see some of the part-time situations because of the low salary. Jonathan, if you move somebody up from $20 to $21 an hour, you know, you're looking at a 5% increase there, right?
Yeah.
But we're looking at some of the lowest paid people when you're looking at the part-timers, as well as the building officials who had not received a raise in the last 3 or 4 years. Plus, we've got the issue with minimum wage. And that will push up a lot of the part-time, especially the seasonal folks. You know, when the minimum wage goes up as much as it has, it just has this ratcheting effect that they'll take some of the other people above it. You can't start paying the lowest person more than the person above them. So we've had to make some certain adjustments there. But I got to tell you, when you look at the lowest wages, and those are the ones you're looking at for the most part, the lowest wages, we are just way behind in certain other communities.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about communities that are right around us, touching our borders. And so
I think you refer to some of the secretary, clerical.
Secretaries.
I wasn't questioning those.
Okay.
And I understand that some of those were related to minimum wage increases.
Okay.
But really, the $1 million question is, well, almost $1 million. There's $930,000 that's put in reserve for the raises for the 4 bargaining units.
That number got.
You'll note in my response that that has already been reduced.
To 820,
No, 754?
754?
Yeah.
And the answer to perhaps the next question, no, we're not going to tell you what the assumed rate is, because that's
So I was wondering if you could tell us the average.
That's subject to bargain.
Average.
That's subject to bargain.
4 contracts that are open, right?
There are 4
Four
contracts.
contracts plus
And
plus
we're not going to
confidential
we're not going to
supervisors.
negotiate them here by telling you what we've put aside.
I don't think the average would give it away. But I wanted to know how you made that
Don't
estimate.
even want to speculate a number. No.
Okay, I was just curious on your exit interview, so it sounds like pension is one, is healthcare another?
Less so.
You know I'm asking.
No, I know why you're asking. No, honestly, Megan, less so the healthcare. We did address with our fire department a healthcare package that you were very much aware of, and changed the healthcare over to a separate group to some success. Although their healthcare is also going up by a much larger number than we thought it would when we first started that, like the towns. It's more so, you know, everybody has different reasons for leaving. Some people won't reveal exactly what they are. Some do have to do with pension, others have to do with quality of life, shift differentials they see in some places, scheduling, closer to home. If someone gets married, they're going to move, so there's a lot of different reasons people leave. With the public, that's basically public safety. With the lower, the people in the GEA especially, it's almost exclusively salary. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, to try and address those lower wages right now.
Any final questions?
One comment. And we're talking about a lot of salary increases, potential salary increases, et cetera. But if you take the cost of the increase in the cost of providing medical for our employees, our budget, you take that increase out, our budget is a 2.4% increase. 2.4.
Less than inflation. I'll note.
Right.
I have a couple more.
Let me just address one last thing on medical.
Yeah.
I know it came up last time in discussing the Board of Education and comparing to that neighbor, Madison. After hearing that information, I did call the Director of Human Resources in Madison to find out what's going on.
120.
Their number is lower than ours, substantially so, and the director is very concerned that the numbers are not correct because they're very much aware of some substantial numbers in their medical, and they're concerned that it should be a bit higher, probably not as high as ours. However, last year, remember this is all based on claims, last year we were able to reduce our medical by about 1% to 2%. Madison's went up by 9%. So it has to do with claims, and it's very cyclical. It goes up and down. We just happen to be caught in a bad year, where the last 2 years we've had very good years. And as I think Linda and Dr. Balistraci explained before, when you compare what our insurance agent showed us over the last 6 to 7 years, we have been very low overall. We have a bad year, and unfortunately, it just happens to coincide with what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if, averaging the general premiums over 2 years doesn't seem possible, but some of these catastrophic claims, I wonder if that should be smoothed out to some degree.
That's why we stopped.
Are you going to get as many catastrophic claims as the previous year? I think that's more of a roller coaster.
It is.
But either way, they seem to be going up. Doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of relief there. All right.
Good thing that was reduced. If we hadn't gone out to bid and reduced those costs, we'd be looking at much higher numbers than we are today. So kudos to the group who did that.
The chairman will allow me another one. I'll
One more.
shift gears away from medical.
Does anybody else have anything before we start? Jonathan, go ahead.
All right, I need a minute or two on this one. I kind of bring this up each year, but I wanted to note that between our environmental consultant and the costs for the herbicides to try to kill the invasive plant life in Lake Quannapoug, town is spending $95,000 this year. And I did a brief search on the internet. The chemicals we're dumping in the lake don't just kill the plant we want to kill. It kills all plants. And then I realized, too, that the chemicals are pretty dangerous. According to the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, exposure to one of the herbicides we use induces respiratory system distress, Raynaud's, labored breathing, pulmonary edema, also known to cause tremors, convulsions, found to cause liver and kidney damage, cataract, pupil dilation, severe skin allergies as well. May cause general malaise, chest pain, and even death. So I look at this expense each year, and I really wonder if we're doing the right thing. I really don't know if this is the right thing for the town. It sounds like the cure might be worse than the problem, and I really think the town should consider stop pouring these chemicals in the lake and save the taxpayers almost $100,000. I think we should really consider it.
Jonathan, thanks for the question. Let me answer. Most significant accusation you made, that we're putting things in there that are unsafe. Everything that goes in that lake is approved by DEEP. We have to apply for permits to put anything in that lake. Secondly, DEP is actually funding some of that. So they have put their money in. And you're reading off a list of potential things from whatever source you're using. I don't think so.
Yeah, not my words.
I don't think
From the
carries
National Institute of Occupational
I don't think
Safety.
I don't think it carries the validity and the seriousness of DEP, who is charged with protecting our environment and the people, would allow us to put something in that lake that was unsafe for humans. Secondly, if we stop treating the lake, that is going to potentially take away a recreational activity that satisfies a significant portion of our community in a variety of ways. The beach, boating, and then the neighbors who live around that lake as well. So if you're willing to say, let's let nature take its course, and that lake will probably cease to exist for recreational use in a certain amount of time, okay, I'm not willing to make that call at this point. We think there is significant value to maintaining that lake as a recreational facility for our community.
Doesn't Choate,
And Choate also contributes to it because they have a boat that they have their crew team at the north end of the lake as well. So.
Thank you. Okay. I'm always looking at the clock to see when the tape's going to end, but I could almost guarantee it's probably going to have to shift on us. So, no further questions to either of the boards at this point. We're going to go ahead and discuss and consider the budgets that are presented to us, and of course possibly vote to move a budget forward to the town. Usually I open this up to discussion regarding where everyone is, but I'm going to take the unenviable task of starting off the discussion and some of my thoughts. Been on the board now 18 years. This is my 18th budget. The first selectman's got more than me, but that's okay. You can have that.
you're much younger.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Thanks for adding some levity to this discussion, because this is probably the most difficult budget season we've had. I have been looking at these numbers like everybody else for weeks, hearing about them for months. I had a very difficult time writing down anything. I wrote down some bullet points. Honestly, I've been thinking about this so much I never had time to write them. So I wrote bullet points 15 minutes before this meeting to try to keep me on track. I've been scouring the numbers. I've been looking at them, and I have struggled every bit to try to find where there could be reductions. What you're about to hear from me is going to probably shock you when I come up with a recommendation based on what I just said. The role of the Board of Finance is to receive these budgets, look at the overall picture, and then consider the taxpayers who are going to be voting on this and whether or not they support this and need the items in here. It's more challenging when you look at these budgets and you see how fair they are. There's absolutely not a doubt in my mind that we hear the word fiscal restraint. This fiscal restraint is not because these budgets are not fiscally restrained and fiscally responsible. It's because we have been dealt as a community, as a state, as a nation, with a lot of challenges that are not in our control. I started writing those down because those came pretty easily. What did we hear tonight? I think we heard most of them. I didn't even look to see what my list said, to see if I could compare them. Mandates, a lot of them unfunded. The car tax calculation changes, which affect us. The grant and ARPA reductions that we've seen. The concerns about federal funding, inflation, the fairness and equity of salaries on both the Board of Education and the town side, and the large increase in insurance claims, which this year ended up being the anomaly. I don't recall or recollect going into a first budget workshop with a recommendation like I am about to put forward, and I'm going to restate this and say and reiterate, it's a recommendation. It is my opinion. It is not going to be in the form of a motion because I want everybody to discuss this. There has been some discussion amongst some of us. And when I look at this, I think about the community that says, we're hurting, inflation is hurting us, give us a break. And then I look at the Board of Ed and I look at the town and I say, yeah, they got a bubble over them? No, they don't. They're experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing. And it drives me crazy when I look at these budgets and say, yeah, I'd love to send them as is. I would love to send them as is. I can't do it. And it hurts me. It pains me that I'm going to make a recommendation like I'm going to make. But I think at some point you have to say the balance of the Board of Finance and us being in the middle has to somewhat take both sides into consideration. I don't like it, but I'm going to recommend it. As I was looking at the numbers, I know this is going to be painful. And again, I've never really looked at these kind of numbers, at least on the first go-around. And I'm going to tell you the main reason that I'm kind of suggesting and going in this direction, I don't want to be back at this table. I don't want to be back for a second referendum because I don't know where we're going to go. I don't even know where you're all going to go if there's a recommended reduction that I'm about to throw out there. But if we come back, it's going to be devastating. Based on everything that I said, and as difficult as it is, I started looking at numbers. I couldn't get to $1 million, but I got to 900,000.
Across both budgets, Mr.
Nope.
Chairman?
Across both budgets, yes, total. And usually that would mean a $900,000 reduction. 2/3, 1/3 is 600, 300. It is a tough year. In 18 years of doing this, I've never looked at a number like this. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, what the, boy, he's never come here with that. But there's got to be some level of balance on this, and we are all dealt with some pretty difficult cards this year. And by the way, I just want to mention that we're probably going to be in a very similar situation next year if medical claims continue to go, because insurance is such a driver this year. You don't think it's going to be a driver next year with claims? They're probably going to continue. We're going to be right back here again. So maybe this is the year to make this kind of reduction and not have to come back here at this table for a second time and go to another referendum and think that we're going to do anything better. Because I think these budgets are really, really good. But somewhere we've got to make some sort of an adjustment here. And that's my opinion, and I'll open it up to the rest of the board.
You want me to go next?
Whoever wants the floor's got it.
So I think your assessment is pretty sobering, and I agree to a certain extent, but of course I'm looking for a higher number. I think it should be 1.5 million. There's a lot of ARPA spending that went.
You could, just like you did, 1.5 total?
Total.
Okay, thank you.
About 900 for the town, about 600 for the school. And I think there was a lot of ARPA spending that, shouldn't have been spent for permanent positions.
Wait a minute, hold on. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yep.
did you say 900 to the town?
Yep.
And 600 to the school?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And I do want to put that in the form of a motion for the taxpayers out there. If it's seconded, I'll go through some of the items that I think we can save on without too much hardship to the taxpayers or the residents.
Okay, well, we'll stop right there for motion on the table. Do we hear a second?
Aren't you curious which items?
Well, because we can't tell them what to cut. Can I make a suggestion? Do you want to split that motion up and we could just do the Board of Ed?
I don't know exactly how the Robert rules work here, but I think if there's a motion on the table, the next comment's got to be a second.
Okay.
So it can't be any discussion unless you second it. Okay, motion on the table fails. Megan, do you want to make? Now, sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but now you can talk.
Based on what you said and
Yeah.
based on what Mr. Trotta said, perhaps we can just do a motion for the Board of Ed side first. And
Since
just-
there's some
Since
agreement. No, I
there's
don't
some
think-
agreement.
There is. Good
And then we
observation.
could discuss the town side after.
No, I
don't
think
see
we
it.
have to, listen, before we start putting, before we start putting motions out there and knocking them down or whatever, I do think that we should probably all have some input on this.
Sure.
Oh,
And
yeah.
maybe- And maybe wait
Agreed.
until everybody said something,
Yeah.
and then we put a motion out there.
Okay.
But I think she was pointing out that we're pretty much have an identical
Yeah,
number.
but you can't.
Bring everybody together.
Yeah,
This rarely happens.
that's a good point.
So
That's
I
rare.
just-
It's a good point.
I just thought it might be.
But the chairman's point is noted. Everyone has to weigh in.
Well, if it holds during the discussion, then maybe we will go ahead and entertain that motion. But I do want to receive everybody's input.
I was at the $1 million mark between the two of them. I was at 750, 250, based on the work that we've seen and the relative size of the budgets, where they started from. And I know that both sides have made intermediate cuts. When you look at their operations, you look at the amount per day that's on the table, I felt that that was appropriate. We're not terribly far apart. I know that there was some numbers higher originally for the town. I'm happy to concede that. I think both the town and the Board of Ed, based on the work that we've done and the numbers that I've run, can survive. It's a tough year, and it is simply a tough year. It's nobody's fault that health went up. I mean, nobody's fault. Certainly not the workers, it's not the employees, it's not the taxpayers' fault. Our job, as you said, is to connect the dots between the people who provide these services, these valuable services, and the people who receive them and pay for them. So I think we've got some flexibility into where other pockets that we can reach for. We're not a million miles away. I think that $1 million is the kind of number, though, that keeps us to one vote at the ballot box on ballot day. I, like you, am trying my damnedest. It's really a big driver for me to keep this from going to two budgets, because the second round would get us beyond this. So that, and it's terribly unfortunate, but that becomes one of the big drivers here, because then what else will people want? So most of it is based on numbers. A little of it, that $1 million mark, is based on optics.
I'm at 900,000 as a whole for the town, unfortunately. And I thank all the departments and the towns for all the hard work. It's been months and months, I know. I've lived it with you all. I think the budget as a whole is reflective of the needs of our community. Many of the initiatives in the budget reflect opportunities for efficiencies and savings, and I truly appreciate that. I think it's a responsible, thoughtful task, and a role that I don't take for granted, nor easily. I think this budget honestly was harder than the year we had COVID, and I can't honestly point to why. I think mostly it's just the unknowns and the impacts that are happening to our residents in town. We're already absorbing unfunded mandates. We don't know the implications of the dismantling of a federal Department of Education. And it just goes on. All this stuff is going, there's a saying, and I won't repeat it, but stuff goes downhill. And we're downhill. And that's how I ended where I am. I think this has to be a status quo year, unfortunately. And I think I am in no way have an illusion that the things that were in this budget that will most likely get cut will come back next year, because there are things that we need. We're just kicking the can down the road, and I hate doing that. But I think this year is the year that we need to toe the line and have a status quo.
Can I ask for clarification? Did you say 900 combined between the town
Yes.
and the?
Well, the difference between, by the way, I think in percentage between 900,000 and 1,000 and a million is 0.7 versus, it's 4.3 versus 4.37, I think. So I understand.
On the mill rate.
On the mill rate, the actual tax increase. So I think that should be enunciated kind of toward the beginning. I understand that kind of gets down to small ball numbers. What I am really looking at is trying to get this done in one. 4.3 versus 4.37.
I think the, I think.
Or, sorry, 4.39. Beg your pardon. Sorry.
I think part of the reason this is so hard, and I agree with everyone who said that this is a very, very challenging year. And I think part of that is because, unlike in COVID, these are things that we're looking at and we're like, okay, I can see why that's gone up. I can see why that's gone up. I can see why that's gone up. We want to retain. I asked the question of both the Board of Education and the town. Are we losing staff to other towns because we're not paying wages that are what other towns are paying? And can we replace those people? And that's something that I don't think is going to change. With COVID, there was hope that that it was going to end at one point. You look at these and you hope that the medical line will go down next year, but then we see the claims that are coming in this year, and I think we're going to be looking at a comparable increase next year. So you look at that and you're like, okay, there's nothing, in my opinion, unreasonable or in either of these budgets. They've already been reduced substantially by the Board of Education and by the Board of Selectmen, and you have to appreciate the effort and the thought that went into the initial proposals from the department heads and the district leadership team, and the efforts that have been made by both boards to bring these numbers down from what was originally being requested. That said, to the chairman's point, we've got to balance the needs of the departments to provide the services and the willingness of the taxpayer and the impact that we're going to have on the taxpayers to fund these budgets. And striking that balance this year is very, very difficult, because either way we go, somebody's going to be unhappy with the result. And I agree with the number, the $1 million number, for the reasons that Bob mentioned. I think it's a substantial cut. It's something that will hopefully keep us away from where we were last year, going out to a second referendum, at which point we'd be making even further deeper cuts to the budgets. I'd be willing to split the difference and go to 650 or 950 between the two, with allocating 700 to the Board of Education and 250 to the town.
I want to make a motion.
I know there's more people to contribute, but I want to clarify something, if I could, Mr. Chairman. I think the reason why we're so far off on the reduction that I'd be looking for from the town is that I envisioned a transfer, and I don't know if that can become part of these deliberations or not, so I admit that I haven't done that before. So if I understand it correctly, last year we had $630,000 of budget surplus, and we added it to committed fund balances. And this year, this is earmarked to do studies. They're going to do a planning for sea level rise, septic systems and water supplies, low-lying coastal zone study for $300,000. We're going to do a master park plan for $130,000, and then a plan for Route 1 commercial corridor for $250,000. So that totals $630,000. And I know that the town wants to go there. They want to make these plans for the future, but maybe this year that money, which was earmarked for these plans, it could forgo the plans, maybe use it to go towards the medical line, transfer it to the medical line to reduce the burden on the taxpayer, reduce the required increase. So I think that's why I'm about, you're saying $900,000 for the town. How could they even do it? That's what I envisioned. I'm not sure if we can incorporate a transfer into this proceedings or not, but I know that's kind of our purview to do transfers when necessary as well.
I mean, that money's that's been voted on and allocated.
It has.
For those funds, so.
It has.
We'd have to revote it back in to unassigned, right? And get it back. if we wanted to go that way,
You
but.
can make a recommendation to use undesignated fund through your budget. Anything else would have to go through separate votes of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to move the other committed funds.
But that's the problem with unfunded, using the unfunded balance is next year is the hole that we have to fill, and we're anticipating having a hole already. Doing that would not be.
I thought this money was in committed funds.
It is in committed funds. I know you want to answer, the tape is, or disc, or whatever it is Michael uses is about to run out. So why don't you go ahead and change it, and we'll put a pause on this. Thank you.